Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This video here I'm going to show how to replace the front struts in a 2010 Nissan Altima Hybrid. I do believe that the front suspension is virtually identical on the hybrid to the regular gas vehicle. But anyways, I'm going to be replacing the struts. I already got a little bit of a start here. I've made sure that the car is secure and cannot roll. I've got the parking brake set, but in addition to that, I've also got chock blocks behind the rear wheels. The rear wheels will be staying on the ground for the duration of this repair. I then jacked the car on just one side. I was going to jack both sides up, but this car is so low to the ground, it makes it very difficult for me to get my floor jack under there, and I'm also working on not very solid ground here, so I don't want to rely on my jack stands. They're not that great. So for safety reasons, I'm going to keep one side of the car on the ground, take care of this side first, and then lower this side and do the other side. Of course, I'll only show the video of me doing this side unless I find something very unusual over there that I want to show you. Alright, so again, secured the car, jacked the car, have removed the wheel. I also want to add one other step I did after jacking the car up. Before I removed the wheel, I got a pry bar underneath here, and I pried on the wheel and I worked the wheel left and right. I'm basically checking to see how what kind of condition the ball joints are in, and I didn't see any unusual slop in there, so I think we're good to go as far as that goes. The other thing I did was I looked at the plate in the tie rod end here where the steering rack ties in here. That seemed okay. So here's the tie rod. This link right here I believe is the drag link. This goes over to this bar. Again, I'm checking for play here where this interfaces with this bar going across, and where it interfaces up here at the top, and that all seems fine. So I think most of my problem lies in the actual strut itself, which looks like it's in pretty rough shape. Hey, just gonna time warp forward for a second here, and I'm on the passenger side, and I want to show that this this link right here, which by the way I've been calling it a sway bar link or drag link, and what it is it's a stabilizer bar link. But this link here on this side, I noticed that I could hear noise when I was moving this bar on this side, and it's because this is worn out. You can hear it. Hear that? That knocking noise? That's happening inside here. And that's the noise I hear when I go down the road and I go over like potholes or a rough patch. I'll hear that really badly. So I've got to replace this link on this side. The new link from CarQuest, I've already picked it up. It was only 22 bucks. So I decided I'm going to go back and do the one on the other side, even though I already put that side back together. Figure they're the same age probably, so when I turn this, you'll notice you can hear that grinding sound. That sounds really horrible, but really all that is that's this metal backing plate right here, which is referred to oftentimes as a dust shield, and I don't know why, but aftermarket it seems like a very difficult part to get. You can get the original OEM ones. This is fairly thin sheet metal, and it takes a real beating on the roads here in New England from the road salt, and they rust. And what happens is big chunks of rust flake off, and they get trapped between what's left of the shield and the back side of the rotor, and when you're going down the road it sounds like heck. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the caliper off, and I'm going to get the rotor off, and I'm going to clean that all out, and if it's in really bad shape I'm just going to remove it. And I'm also going to check, and if my brake shoes are kind of skinny, this is the perfect opportunity to put new shoes in this thing while I'm at it. But for starters, I want to focus on the strut itself. So the lower section of the strut is physically attached to this unit right here by two large bolts right here with nuts on them. But before you take these off, you have to make sure that you've disconnected your brake line. Now, I'm not going to disconnect the line itself because I don't need to, and I don't want to have to bleed the system. All I'm doing is I'm going to remove this clip right here, and that's going to allow me to take the line off of this bracket that supports the line. The bracket is actually attached to the lower part of the strut here. Also, you'll see this line right here. This line, I believe, is a brake sensor. It's a sensor for the ABS, and it comes up here and it goes through a grommet that clips into a clip on this side of the strut and around, and then another clip on this side. So again, we're going to take those out of there. That way when we go to take the strut out, we don't have to worry about damaging this. So what I'm actually replacing is what's called the strut assembly. The strut is actually the cartridge inside, and then there's the spring coil is the other component. And you can buy the complete assembly fairly reasonably. And the upper part of the strut actually attaches to the car in this part of the body, which is called the strut tower. And that's actually done through these 3 bolts right here. You do not want to mess with this bolt right here. I call that a bolt. It's actually, that's a locking nut with, I believe, some sort of dampening adjustment. You don't want to deal with that. So here's one of the new struts. I bought these a while back and just haven't gotten around to doing this job. So this is what the strut assembly looks like. So here we see the lower section that actually has the 2 big bolts that go through. Here are the brackets for that ABS sensor. Here's the bracket for the brake line. So the strut cartridge is inside here, and then we've got this spring here. So you can purchase just the lower part here. This actually stays with the lower part. So you can actually get just replacement strut cartridges and reuse the coil and this top part right here that actually has almost like a bearing in the top here. In order to do that, what you have to do is you have to have a strut compressing tool that allows you to compress this spring so you can get that out and then put the new one in and then release it. The cheap strut compression tools that you can rent for free at many auto parts stores are essentially just some hook-shaped parts with threaded rods that are in between, and as you turn the rods, they pull the hooks together. So you're relying on hooking on these springs on a couple sides, and you basically turn that screw, and because it's got a reverse thread on one side, it will pull that together and compress the spring. Those can be very dangerous. They have a tendency to want to pop off on you at the worst time, like when it's under tension. There are plenty of videos of people having those things blow off on them. You can see because of the way the coil is, you know, you're going to have this on at a tilt, and it just ends up being a proposition you don't need to get into. There is a professional strut compression tool that mounts on a wall. It's a fairly large unit that allows you to safely compress this and get the strut out. If you want to see one of those in action, you can just search for my 2007 Honda Pilot strut replacement. In that video I did the struts on my wife's 2007 Honda Pilot, and I only did the cartridges on that one. One of the things that I learned is that because of the way this is put together, when you take this part apart with the bearing inside here, it tends to fall apart. You can see there's actually grease inside here. So instead of having to deal with possibly finding out that there's parts in this that are worn, possibly finding out that you've got a crack or a spring that no longer has the proper tension, all that, just replace the whole unit is my advice. That strut compression tool that I used in that video, those things new are several $100s, so really the only shops that invest in those would be professional auto repair shops. And today, these days, A lot of shops don't even bother. They just buy the whole assembly like this because, again, the price between just buying this cartridge assembly and buying the entire unit, it's well worth paying the difference in order to avoid that extra work. Any super fans out there for Steve's channel? What is the significance of the Tim Hortons coffee mug? Alright, so I already popped out these two grommets. You just push them out and they pop up fairly easily. Now I want to take off this clip right here, which is badly rusted and might, quite frankly, it might just disintegrate. I found that if you use a pair of what I used to call water pump pliers back in the day, these channel locks, you can grab the lip on here and tap them. And pop them out like that. Now the only thing holding this in here now is rust. There we go. So once that pops down, now that comes right out. We'll just move that off to the side. Alright, now I'm going to break loose the large nuts here. And that's a 13/16. Fits on there nicely. Use my large breaker bar. This is usually pretty tight. Now that I've got them loose, I can switch over to a ratchet. Once you get them to a certain point, now the bolt head starts to turn on you, so you've got to hold the other side. If these bolts are stuck for any reason, what you could do is, before you take the nut all the way off, leave the nut on there to protect the threads and give it a tap. If you have a non-marring hammer, you know, a plastic mallet or something like that, even better. The important thing is never take the nut off and strike the end of a bolt like this, because you will damage the very first thread there and make it really difficult when you go to put things back together. Ask me how I know that. Now I'm going to take this nut off, and before I slide this bolt out, I am going to get something underneath to support this whole hub assembly. So I've got to disconnect this drag link right here. So this nut appears to be 19 millimeter. To make things interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, 18 millimeter, just to make things interesting. So because this is almost like a universal joint back there, once you get this nut broken free, this inside stud is going to want to keep turning. So you can only loosen it so far before you get to a point where you've got to hold it from the back. Now, of course, the back, you can't get to the back, but there's a space in there where you can get a wrench to hold that stud from turning. I just realized that the boot, the rubber boot that protects that joint, the lower one is damaged, and so I think I'm going to want to replace these drag links, or at least this one, while I get this open. So this is what you can't see on the upper one that I'm dealing with. See that on the back side here, there's nothing to grab onto. But there's a rubber boot right here, which once I get that out, I'll be able to show you the damage that I'm talking about. Not really focusing, is it? Nah. So I was able to get the strut to swivel the other way so that I can get to the back side of that drag link stud and hold it with my adjustable wrench so that I can finish unbolting this. Now, remember how I said in the beginning that if I could jack the car up safely on my jack stands, that I would do both sides at the same time? One of the reasons why it's nice to do that is because you see what's happening here. This is actually tilting badly this way, because what's happening is this other end of this drag link is attached to that bar. That bar is pushing this drag link up this way. And the reason why is because that whole bar is being turned by the fact that it's attached to the other side, and that wheel is on the ground, and that strut is being compressed. So that's all being twisted this way. So this wants to go up. So as soon as I pop this out of here, that sucker is going to pop up that way, and it's going to be very difficult for me to get that back in. Furthermore, I'm liable to damage the threads on this when I go to take this out, which I haven't decided yet if I'm going to need to replace that drag link. So what I want to do is I want to get this to go down so I can actually see the bar down there. So this is the bar in question. The other side of the drag link is right here. So if I can get something on this, so if I get something in there, I should be able to pry that down. If I go in through this way, there we go. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on this bar, pop this out. There we go. Now with the drag link disconnected, work can move to the top side. On the top, we've got 3 13mm bolts, one here, and one here. Need a short socket to get underneath here. One of these ratcheting gear wrench deals seems to work just fine, and I can see just by how loose that is now that this bolt does not need to be touched. And then you just want to make sure you don't catch the ABS cable here, damage it as you're dropping that out. It comes out pretty easily. You'll notice on the top there's a notch right here. That notch is for where that other bolt that I didn't touch actually bolts the shock tower part of the body to the inner part of the body there. So we'll just keep that in note. Keep that in mind when we're reassembling, that way we'll know. And when you grab your new strut assembly, you want to make sure you grab the right one. There are 2 different part numbers. They're almost identical. These are Monroe's, so the part numbers are 172905 and 172906. The 906 is the driver's side, and if you mix them up, you're going to go to put it together, and if you get too far along, you're going to really regret it, because you're going to find that this bracket that supports the brake line is going to be on the wrong side. So that's how you can tell the two. If you mix them up, you can tell the two apart by the fact that the bracket should be on the same side as the one you just took out. So as your struts age, they tend to lose their resiliency as far as the springs and that go. So you actually end up losing height in your front end, which I had started to notice. And you know, now when I've got the new strut in, I've put the bolts in the top strut tower in loosely. I'm going to tighten those later, but I've just got them in loosely, and now I go to line this up and I can see that I'm pretty far off as far as where this needs to be. In other words, I've got to drop this down about 3/4 of an inch before this bolt will even go in. But that's good, because that means that I'm dropping the wheel down, but the body's staying in the same position. So I'm actually going to end up gaining some of my height back. Now that's going to compress when I put the weight of the vehicle in there, but it's not going to compress as much as it was before. I probably should have done a check of the height here in the wheel well between the top of the tire and the top of the wheel well here before and after. Maybe I'll do that on the other side just out of curiosity, but I already knew that it was a change. So since I've just got a wooden block in here, I can take this block out and drop this down, and voila. At this point I'm going to go ahead and clip these grommets that hold this ABS sensor cable in position. I'm going to put these back in. That'll just keep that from flopping around on me. Oh, that's bent from shipping. Now I've got to look up some torque specs for these two lower bolts. Just want to mention real quick, the other reason why I like to put this ABS sensor cable into position before I bolt this up is because it's easy to forget about this, and if you end up putting this all together and then go to do this as the last step and inadvertently realize you forgot to have this loop on this side, well then you could either unbolt everything to get it in the right position, or if you do happen to do that, what you can do is there's one small bolt that is down behind here that actually retains the sensor. So you can actually take this little bolt out, take the sensor out, route it back around the way you need to, and then put it back in that way if you happen to make that mistake. These bolts right here, the specs I'm finding are 103 foot-pounds, and I would definitely advise that anybody watching the video here might want to confirm that themselves for the year, make, and model of their vehicle. You can do that with a Google search, but I'm going to go with 103 foot-pounds. But before I do that, I'm going to put a little bit of thread locker, blue thread locker, on the threads. Now that I got these bolts torqued up, normally the next step I would do would be to clip this brake line back into the bracket where it belongs, but I'm going to leave that undone for now because remember I said I'm going to end up doing my brakes while I've got this off and taking care of this problem with the brake shield. So what I'm going to do is temporarily I'm going to jack the car up a little further so I can get this block back underneath the rotor, and then I'm going to lower the car. That will put weight on the strut, compress the strut, and simulate me having the wheel back on. I'm going to leave the drag link undone for now because, as you can see, it's a mile off, so it's going to be harder for me to get that into position with the strut uncompressed. Remember, I still have the bolts in the strut tower loose, and from what I've seen online, that's the recommended procedure, is to actually leave those loose and tighten those after you've got the car, everything else tightened up. And I'll show you a trick for aligning that in a minute. So now I've got the weight off the jack. So the strut has been now compressed so much so that in fact I can actually just about get the stud on the drag link back into the hole. So big difference. All I'm going to do is put my pry bar back in where I did before, push down on this a little bit, slide this into position. I think this is a 21 millimeter wrench you can use on the back side here to keep this from spinning. I don't remember, I just used my adjustable because it was handy and it fit. And then I'm going to torque this to 58 foot-pounds, which is what I found online. And again, I would caution that if you're not sure on that, go ahead and check with your service manual if you have one, or call the dealer, or go online and make your own judgment. So now we're going to take care of these 3 bolts up in the top here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and shift that strut a little bit. And actually that's looking like it's pretty good right there. What I'm doing is I'm looking to see if I can line up the strut in a way so that these bolts, flanges right here, actually line up with the witness marks, or the dirt line, so to speak, left by when I took the originals out. Try and get the alignment as close as possible to what it was. These get torqued to 26 foot-pounds. just taking the rotor off, you know, a chunk like that falls out. That might be all it is. But while I'm in here, well, look at all of this stuff that's ready to come loose. Scrape it all out. Well, no matter how much I cleaned it, and even tried bending this back a little bit, it was still rubbing. And then I noticed this bright, shiny spot right here and realized that's rubbing really bad right there for some reason. It has been. And I could see now what I missed. This is actually rolled right here. This has been damaged to the point where it actually pushed down and rolled over itself right there. So that probably a piece of road debris flew up and got wedged in between there and caused that. Actually, I'm not sure, but regardless, that's what my problem is. So I've got to secure this up above so that I have a little bit more working room here, and pound this back out back that way, and hopefully that'll take care of it. I really don't want to have to take this off. This is bolted in here. It's sandwiched between the back side of these two pieces, so I don't want to take this completely apart. These are probably seized in there anyways. Probably end up snapping off on me. Sometimes just all the bending and prying is not going to get you anywhere with these shields, so I just cut it off. Made quick work of it with my grinder and a cut-off wheel. Now, no more scraping noise. Alright, just going to reinstall my caliper and put the wheel on. Alright, now with the wheel back on and the car back on the ground off the jack, I'm just going to make a measurement here. I'm going to put this board on the high spot on the wheel, just a rough measurement, and from this edge of the board to the top of the fender opening, I'm getting about 2 1/8 inch on this side. Now this is over on the passenger side that I haven't replaced the strut yet. It's about 1 3/8 inches, so that's about 3/4 of an inch more lift I'm getting on the other side with the new strut. And now a height check on the passenger side after installing the new strut, and from the top of the wheel well opening to the top of the block is now 2 inches. So I just finished installing the wheel, and I torqued up the lug nuts to 90 pounds each in a crisscross pattern, and that pretty much is it. So I'm just going to do the same exact thing to the other side, so I'm not going to bother filming that. Get the gist of it from what I've done here. There is one last important step that you should do after completing both sides. You should get a front end alignment done. This alignment is not going to be correct after doing this job, so if you do not get a front end alignment done, you run the risk of having uneven tire wear. So other than that, I think that about covers it. Thanks for watching.